In my 35 years as a safety professional, I've learned something most business owners don't understand until they've been through it. A serious safety failure is never about the fine. Oh, the fine is what makes the newspaper, and the fine is what gets discussed at the next safety meeting for sure. But in almost every major incident I've seen, the fine ends up being the cheapest part of the entire event. Most companies think that they have a reasonably good safety program because they respond when something forces them to spend money. A customer requesting training, a project requires certifications, an OSHA inspector shows up because somebody has gotten hurt, and suddenly everyone starts scrambling. What they don't realize is that safety consequences operate on a delayed timeline, and the deficiencies that exist today may not show up for months or years. I worked with a contractor on a project valued at approximately $15 million. The work itself wasn't the issue. The workers were capable, the equipment was available, the funding was secure, yet the company found itself effectively shut down because critical documentation wasn't where it needed to be. The project didn't stop because of a lack of capability, it stopped because of a lack of system management. And here's the pattern I've watched repeat itself for 35 years. Organizations rarely appreciate the value of a real safety system when things are going well. They recognize the value after a shutdown, after a citation, after a serious injury, and after the attorney starts asking questions, after a premiums climb, and after the reputation damage costs them the next contract. The irony is that the companies with the greatest long-term success rarely wait for these events to happen. Here's why that pattern is so dangerous. The most common assumption in safety management is that we trained them. Hey, therefore we've done everything we could. Those are some of the most dangerous words in the business. Training by itself does not create competency. Attendance does not create understanding. Certificates do not create behavior, and documents alone do not create defensibility. When I start talking about pre-assessments or competency verifications, behavioral observations, coaching, and reinforcement, a lot of companies lose interest. Not because they're bad companies, not because they don't care about people, because they're buried under immediate pressures like production schedules and project deadlines, profit margins, staffing shortages, customer expectations. The companies that win for the long haul understand that the true value of safety isn't found in compliance, it's found in sustainability, and sustainability requires measurement. Real safety performance is not built through occasional training events, it's built through continuous engagement, continuous reinforcement, and continuous leadership. The problem is that most growing companies are stuck in the middle ground. They're too small to justify a full-time safety director, but they're too large to rely on a trainer who shows up once and disappears. They're winning bigger projects, hiring more people, taking more risk. They're facing more scrutiny, and they don't have the internal resources to build and sustain a real safety management system. That's the gap. But there's a cost to that gap that nobody puts on a spreadsheet, and it's the one that does the most damage, because when a serious incident hits, the worst part isn't the penalty or the shutdown. It's what happens to everything you can't get back. Most people think the worst thing about a serious incident is a regulatory penalty, but the injured worker in that confined space story wasn't just another employee. He was the son of the owner's best friend, not a casual acquaintance, his best friend, the kind of friendship built over decades through family gatherings, hunting trips, little league games, weddings, holidays, and in a single afternoon, all of that changed. At first, everyone focused on the injured worker's recovery. Everybody wanted the same thing. Everybody hoped the friendship would survive. But lawsuits have a way of changing people. Attorneys get involved. Statements were taken. Experts were hired. Allegations were made. The owner found himself sitting across the conference table from the people he had known his entire life. People who had shared meals with him, people who had vacationed with him, people who had considered him family. Every deposition reopened the wound. Every filing added another layer of resentment, and the friendship that had taken decades to build started to come apart. Camping trips stopped happening, family barbecues quietly disappeared, the hunting season invitations never came, holiday gatherings got divided, and mutual friends found themselves choosing sides. That's another consequence of a serious incident that nobody wants to talk about. In a small community, your reputation isn't just your reputation. It's your family's reputation. It's your company's reputation. It's your children's reputation. It's your legacy. The local newspaper runs the story once. The community talks about it for years. Even after the investigations end, even after the lawsuits settle, even after the fines are paid, the story never completely goes away. The owner eventually told me something I've never forgotten. He said the financial losses were painful. The project losses were painful. The legal fees were painful. But what hurt the most was realizing that no matter what happened in court, no matter what experts concluded, no matter what the settlement was, things would never go back to the way they were before that day. That's the part that safety statistics don't capture. OSHA logs don't measure it. MSHA citations don't measure it. Financial statements don't measure it. The emotional damage, the personal guilt, the sleepless nights, the permanent change in how people see each other. That one incident just didn't damage a company. It damaged relationships that had taken a lifetime to build. It altered families, it changed futures, and the real costs unfolded quietly over months and years that follow, and lost opportunities, lost reputation, and the painful realization that some things never get repaired. Effective safety management isn't ultimately about avoiding citations, it's about protecting people, relationships, families, businesses, and futures. Because when a serious incident happens, the question is no longer, what will the fine be? The question becomes, what parts of your life will never be the same? Now you understand what's actually at stake when this goes wrong. But there's a group of companies that almost never end up here. And it isn't because they spent more on safety. It's because they made one decision differently than everyone else. And that decision is what separates the companies that just survive from the ones that consistently win. Average companies view safety as a necessary expense, something they have to do because OSHA requires it, insurance companies expect it, or customers demand it. Safety becomes a cost center, a line item, an obligation that produces little visible return. But the most successful organizations treat safety as a strategic business asset that touches nearly every metric that matters. Profitability, productivity, employee retention, customer confidence, insurance costs, legal exposure, reputation, and growth. The first thing you'll notice about these companies is how they budget. Most organizations budget for safety the same way they budget for emergencies. They don't plan for it until something forces them to spend the money. The most successful companies do the opposite. They establish a fixed monthly investment in safety and maintain it year-round. Whether business is booming or slow, whether a project is starting or ending, whether regulators are visiting or not, for a smaller organization, that investment might be $500 a month. For larger, more complex organizations, they might invest several $1,000s. The actual amount is an important part. What really is important is the consistency, because consistency creates systems, systems create habits, habits create culture, and culture drives performance. The second thing you'll notice is how they staff. Many owners assume hiring a full-time safety professional automatically solves the problem. The reality is that internal safety personnel become victims of competing priorities. One week they're conducting inspections, the next week they're helping operations, then managing paperwork, then covering scheduling. Before long, the person you hired for safety is spending most of their time doing everything except safety. And here's the difference with the fractional safety director model. The director has one mission: safety. They're not getting pulled into equipment procurement or production schedules. Their attention stays focused on hazard identification, training effectiveness, compliance, documentation, and continuous improvement. The difference gets even sharper when you look at how these companies train. Most organizations train because they have to. The best ones train because they want results. They don't treat training as a one-time event, because sitting someone in a classroom for a few hours does not create competency. Instead, they establish baselines. They run pre-assessments. They identify knowledge gaps, language barriers, and literacy challenges. Then they train. Then they measure again, document the improvement, and verify understanding. The highest risk hazards like fall protection, confined space, lockout, tagout, electrical, machine guarding become reoccurring topics rather than an annual compliance exercise. And they understand something most companies overlook. Every piece of safety documentation may eventually become evidence, not during an audit, during a deposition, during litigation, after a serious injury or fatality. So their documentation tells a story. It doesn't just show attendance, it shows baseline assessments, knowledge improvement, competency verification, field observations, corrective actions, and management involvement. T's crossed, I's dotted. It proves that safety wasn't a box they checked. It was a process they actively managed. And the most visible result of all of this shows up in metrics contractors watch closely: their experience modification rate. When a company consistently invests in training, hazard recognition, and documentation, that effort shows up in their claims history. Fewer injuries, lower claims costs. Over time, the EMR drops below 1. That one number starts creating opportunities. Carriers notice. Underwriters notice, general contractors notice, bid opportunities open up, insurance rates improve, pre-qualification scores climb. What started as a safety investment has now become a competitive advantage. A lower EMR just doesn't save money. It quietly changes what your company is allowed to compete for. But companies that understand this have figured out something most owners never do. The entire of building safety this way isn't protection at all. Most companies miss this entirely. Safety isn't just protecting you from accidents, reducing citations, or avoiding lawsuits. When you build it in strategically, safety improves operational consistency. It builds employee confidence and it earns customer trust. It strengthens your reputation, it improves your profitability, and ultimately, it drives sustainable growth. Think about what happens when you have a credit mod and you go up against a competitor with a higher bid. You're probably going to win the work because your accident becomes their accident. When the general contractor sees a low accident level recorded by your insurance company, they say, wow, this credit mod is really powerful. That's the moment safety becomes an unfair playing field. It's where smart companies gain a tactical and strategic advantage over the competition. In construction, manufacturing, mining, energy, and industrial services, a company's safety performance becomes part of its brand. Customers notice, general contractors notice, insurance carriers notice, regulators notice, and the workers you want to hire, they notice too. Sophisticated clients have moved past just asking about injury rates. They're asking deeper questions about your culture and your systems, your accountability, and your sustainability. That's because safety isn't really about compliance. Compliance is the minimum standard. The real objective is building a system that consistently produces the outcomes you want. Workers who understand hazards, supervisors who reinforce expectations, managers who measure performance, leaders who demonstrate commitment, and documentation that tells a credible story. Real safety isn't just checking a box or collecting certificates or surviving the next audit. It's building a sustainable system where knowledge gets retained, reinforced, measured, and applied in the field every single day. That's exactly the gap that fractional safety director model closes. Training stops being a one-time event. Documentation stops being a one-time exercise. Improvement becomes continuous. Deficiencies get caught earlier, and safety transforms from a compliance function into a business function. The most successful companies I've worked with eventually arrive at the same conclusion. They stop viewing safety as a cost center and start viewing it as a growth strategy. A mature safety program improves client confidence, strengthens insurance relationships, and supports recruiting and retention. And it becomes a competitive advantage. Safety becomes an unfair playing field in your favor. For companies serious about growth and sustainability and reputation, the fractional safety director model often becomes the most practical path forward because safety isn't something you do after growth occurs. Safety is one of the reasons growth occurs. But there's a level of competitive advantage, a conversation I have with owners that has nothing to do with OSHA or MSHA training at all. And it's the one thing that finally makes CFOs and CEOs who saw safety as an overhead realize that they've been making a serious mistake by not investing in it. One of my favorite conversations to have with a CFO or CEO or a general manager, a president, or an owner has nothing to do with OSHA regulations, training requirements, or compliance standards. Instead, I ask one simple question. What's your exit strategy? The question catches people off guard. Some laugh and some tell me they haven't thought about it. Others start talking about retirement, success, selling to a competitor, or bringing in a private equity firm, or passing the business on to their children. That's when the conversation gets interesting. Most owners aren't building a company just to own a company. They're building an asset, something that provides financial freedom, supports their family long after they're gone, and can eventually be sold, merged, or left behind as a legacy. And one of the largest indicators of an organization's risk is safety performance. That's where companies make a critical mistake. They see safety as an expense, as an overhead, a necessary evil. So they approach it with one question: what's the cheapest way we can satisfy this requirement? But sophisticated buyers and investors and lenders, private equity firms, don't evaluate businesses based on minimum requirements. They evaluate businesses on risk exposure. When a buyer reviews your company, they're not just reading financial statements, they're examining everything that become a future liability: your claims history, workers' compensation performance, litigation records, OSHA and MSHA history, your experience modification rate, your management systems, your culture, and they're asking whether safety is built into the business or just performed as a compliance exercise. A company with recurring incidents, poor documentation, and a history of claims represents uncertainty, and uncertainty reduces value. I've watched years of hard work and profitability get overshadowed by risk concerns that surface during due diligence. A buyer doesn't care how many certificates you have hanging on your wall if they believe future liabilities are hiding behind them. They don't care how many training classes you've ran if there's no proof they worked. They don't care how many policies you have if nobody followed them. What they care about is predictability. Companies that demonstrate strong safety performance send a powerful message. They communicate discipline. They communicate leadership. They communicate accountability. Most importantly, they communicate stability, and stability has value. For many entrepreneurs, their business is the majority of their net worth, not their house, not their retirement account, the company. And every decision either increases that asset's value or it decreases it. So stop asking, how little can we spend? And start asking, how do we make safety one of our strongest business assets? That subtle shift changes everything. Training becomes an investment, documentation, protection. Leadership involvement becomes strategy. Risk management becomes enterprise value management. The result is a company that doesn't just survive audits. It attracts opportunities and it earns trust. It wins better work. It retains stronger employees. It commands higher valuations, and it becomes far more desirable to future buyers, investors, and successors. At its highest level, doing safety right isn't about avoiding citations, and it's not even only about avoiding injuries. Although that's critical, it's about building a stronger, more valuable, more sustainable organization. It's about protecting the decades of effort that went into building the company in the first place, so that when the day comes to retire, sell or merge or pass the business to the next generation, it's viewed as a prized asset instead of a liability nobody wants to inherit. And the answer to that question is heavily influenced by how seriously you've treated safety long before the buyer ever shows up. If you found this video useful, check out my next video on this channel.